by the way.
You have my consent.
Oh.
All right. Thank you both. So let's start the seminar. So today we have the pleasure of welcoming Olga Mula, who is associate professor in tenure associate professor in Paris-Dauphine University and the research group CEREMAD. And she will talk about incorporating displacement data in models for the COVID epidemic. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
For forecasting.
Forecasting. Yeah. Right.
Thanks a lot for the introduction and also for the kind invitation. I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, sorry, I just allow you.
Done this before. Okay. So can you see the screen?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so this is a talk on several works that I have started in March last year out of frustration during the lockdown here in Paris. So the main goal was to contribute to do epidemiological forecasting on our pandemic, and also to think about what is the impact of mobility in all this pandemic. How can we quantify its effect and maybe try to predict what can happen, and thus also try to incorporate some mobility data also in our forecasting methods. So all this are some works that have come out of discussions with two groups, a group from Sorbonne Université, articulated around Professor Yvon Madet, and in which I worked with Atman Bakhtar and Thomas Bravo from Institut Carnot. And also I've been working with colleagues from my university at Paris-Dauphine, which is now belonging to a bigger cluster of a university called Paris-Sciences Lettres. And so there we have launched an initiative called Facing the Virus. And there I'm working with Jamal Latif, Olivier Capet, Akin Kazaksky, Yannick Leo, and Laurent Massouli. So I would like to summarize in this talk what we have been doing and producing, and just for the sake that there's no misunderstanding on what is my expertise, I just like to say that I am an applied mathematician. I am absolutely not an expert in medical science, but I felt that I could contribute in the field of epidemiology because, as it so happens, I am an expert in what they call model reduction of parametrized PDEs. And this is a field in which you are given a certain PDE or a certain ODE with parameters, and our job is to try to somehow summarize the information which is contained in these parametric PDE solutions, and so try to do things out of this condensation. And so this felt pretty useful for some aspects of these epidemics, and hence my interest in also contributing in this field. So, as I said, my scientific goals are not to develop any drugs or whatever. I cannot do this, but what I would like is to develop forecasting methods for epidemiology, and also try to combine data that seem relevant to understand the dynamics of the propagation of it. So in particular, to combine the series of health data with mobility, the population density, and also we would like to start with Yvon to try to also combine this data from wastewaters. And also, as a disclaimer, obviously, depending on the data that I am given, I am going to try to adapt my algorithms, and also my conclusions can change depending on the new data that can come. So this is just to say that it's the results are fluid and not completely fixed. And so this is the current state as of today, the one I'm going to present now. So here's the plan of the talk. Unfortunately, we have not a closed loop on a methodology for epidemiological forecasting combining mobility data. So I'm going to split the talk into a first contribution where we have developed an algorithm for one single region where we do forecasting of the series of infected and removed people, and where we used model reduction. And so this is in a recent paper that we have very recently published with Yvon and his team. And the second part of the talk will be devoted to discussing what we have observed from mobility data that we have thanks to some agreements with Facebook in our university. And so the study of this mobility data have led to two documents for the greater public that we have published on, first of all, the feedback on mobility during the lockdown. That was our first report. And on a second report, we have studied what we can say about mobility and population density on the COVID outbreak between February and November, which is the time between the two waves that we've had here in France and in Europe in general. So let us focus first on our first contribution, which is epidemiological forecasting using model reduction. So our goal is to predict the series of infected people, which I'm going to denote by I. So whenever I'm given data of these infected people, I am going to have this subscript ops here, I observed. And so, in fact, the data are not the number of infected people. What we are given in general is the number of hospitalized people. At least this is for the case of France, which is the one I'm going to focus. So we are given the amount of people that arrive to the hospital, the series of age observed. And so from certain references in the literature, we somehow lift this series of hospitalized to the series of infected by multiplying here by a factor 15, which is of course questionable and probably should evolve in time and so on. But well, for our work, we multiplied here by a factor 15 to deduce our series of observed infected. We also want to predict the series of removed people, understood in the sense of the SEER model, where the removed people are the dead and the recovered. And so the tests, the results I'm going to show are going to be derived for the case of Paris, but they could obviously be applied to any mono region where we consider that the population is constant. So in the case of Paris, the series of observed infected people have evolved during the last year, as I show in this first plot, and the removed people evolved as in the bottom plot. And so the data are relatively shaky in the sense that, for instance, there seem to be, hospitals have a different way of reporting data during the weekends, for instance. So this makes the series a bit shaky. So for our forecasting purposes, we have applied a smoothing rolling average of window of 1 week to produce our forecasts. So these are our data, and what we would like to do is to know what happens in the future. So for this, what we are going to do is, so we are going to follow the strategy I'm going to outline. So consider the family of shear dynamics with the coefficients beta and gamma that are going to be time dependent. Assume that they are in L infinity of 0t, t being the present time. And so I recall here the ODE for the shear model, which I suppose that for this audience it's known very well. I suppose a constant population, and now my observation is to say that in fact the evolution of the observed infected and removed people belongs to this family of shear dynamics with beta and gamma depending on time and belonging to this L infinity space. And so in fact the proof is really very naive and very easy. Why is it so? Because so if you give me IOPS and ROPS, assume that I can differentiate them. So then in fact I can just play around with these formulas and derived a set beta ops equal to this kind of formulas involving my observations on I, S, and R, and the same for gamma. And if now I take this beta and gamma ops and I stick them into this shear dynamics, I am obviously going to reproduce the evolution of my health data, IOPS and ROPS. So this means that this family of shear dynamics, it has perfect approximation properties in the sense that if we search for beta and gamma in this space L infinity, then I am going to perfectly fit IOPS and ROPS until the present time in which I have been given the data. And also, technically, if I look for betas and gammas for the future time t and t plus forecasting window tau, then I can technically find values for beta and gamma that are going to perfectly fit what is going to happen in the future. So, but what is the issue here? The issue is that this space L infinity is really too large to build a practical algorithm. And we need to identify a smaller approximation class for beta and gamma in order to really pin down a practical algorithm to work with. So our goal is to find this smaller approximation class, and what we did in our work with Yvon, Atman, and Thomas was to look for subspaces spanned by time-dependent functions beta 1, beta 2, beta n, and the same space Gn of functions gamma 1, gamma 2, gamma n, where the dimension n is small, and where we are going to look for a representation of good time-dependent beta and gamma. And once I have a good time-dependent beta and gamma, then I stick them into my shear dynamics and I propagate it, and I can have a forecast for not only for 0t, but also for any forecasting window t, t plus tau. And so really the idea is then that all this, we are momentarily going to forget about the data, and we are going to go virtual in the sense that we are going to solve ODEs, and these ODEs can be propagated from time 0 to the future time t plus tau, and not only t. We don't stop at the present time. And so here's our strategy to find these spaces, beta, Bn, and Gn that I have just discussed. So the first step is going to consist of working with epidemiological complex models that have been introduced in the literature and that seem well adapted for our COVID pandemic, or if we had another pandemic. So we take the best detailed model that we could. We could actually even consider several detailed models. And what we are going to do with these detailed models is to generate virtual scenarios. So what are we going to do in practice? So we take, for example, a model, this model introduced by Kolitsa and his collaborators to describe the COVID pandemic. So it has 11 compartments. There have also been other detailed models that have been introduced, like one by Pierre Magal in particular, which we also worked with in our pandemic. And so this detailed model, it has a lot of compartments and it has a lot of parameters. In this case, we have 10 parameters, and I'm going to condense them into the notation mu. This is a vector of parameters. It condenses this 10 parameters. And I am going to assume that these parameters are not time dependent. So I consider this model with these parameters. And what I am going to do is that I'm going to make these parameters vary. So for this, let me introduce some further notation. I just introduced the parameters. So this is my mu. Just one question, actually, can you see my arrow, my mouse? Or
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
You can see it.
And so for this vector of parameters, we associate the solution of the ODE, which I denote by U of mu. So here U of mu, it has so the 11 compartments and they depend on time. So, and I am going to propagate them from time 0 to the future time t plus tau. So now we assume that the parameters take values in a certain range. So we inspire ourselves from plausible values from the literature, but we don't know exactly what is the best one. So we are going to make them vary. We don't introduce any prior distribution on these parameters. So it's as if we consider like a uniform distribution on them. We are going to generate solutions for these parameters, and eventually, if we consider the set of all the solutions when the parameters vary in the range that we have prescribed, we get this what we call in our field of model reduction. We get the manifold of solutions. It's the set of all solutions when I make the parameters vary. So this is going to provide a set of virtual scenarios with a detailed model. And the next step to build our prediction algorithm is going to take this very detailed model and try to condense it in only 3 compartments because I know, so I want to go from my very detailed model, which contains thoughts on the dynamics on the epidemics and so on, and I want to somehow compress this information into a SEER evolution. For this, I then condense my 11 compartments into 3 compartments. For this, I take the compartments and I add them up following rules that I mean that seem plausible to us. For instance, the compartment by Kolitsa from the susceptible and exposed. So we are going to add them up, and this is going to be our susceptible collapsed. We are going to have an infectious collapse and a removed collapse. And so once we do this, the associated dynamics is just so we take the derivatives and take the formulas by Kolitsa, and so the collapse variables are going to follow a certain dynamics. What happens is that the collapse variables will not follow a SEER dynamics in general. This is a bit problematic because so in our pipeline, what we want is to really propagate the SEER dynamics with time-dependent coefficients. So what are we going to do? What we are going to do is to take the dynamics of the collapsed variables, the S dot, the derivative, I dot and R dot. And we are going to look for parameters beta and gamma that are as close as possible, so that they are as close as possible to the collapsed dynamics. So in a sense, it's as if I take the detailed model, I collapse it into only 3 compartments, and then I project its dynamics into a shear model with time-dependent coefficients, and this projection is done in the least square sense. And this is going to give me functions beta and gamma that are going to depend on time. And this beta and gamma can be defined on 0 until time t plus tau, my forecasting window. So once I have this beta and gamma depending on time from the projected shear dynamics, I vary the coefficients of my detailed model. So this is going to yield a family of time-dependent betas and gammas, which define the sets that I called B and G. And so then we used our know-how on model reduction. And what we did is that we took these sets and we tried to approximate them by linear spaces. And the idea was that technically, if these sets are smooth enough, we are going to need only spaces of relatively small dimension to approximate what is going on in these sets. And this is going to be the key in order to further deliver the forecasts. So we apply these model reduction techniques. There are several. We could apply singular value decomposition, non-negative matrix factorization. This technique was particularly relevant because our betas and gammas are non-negative. And when we apply SVD, we may end up with approximations that give negative values, and this we don't want. So we applied this kind of technique, and then we actually proposed some refinement of this non-negative matrix factorization, which we called non-negative greedy, which was approximating in the con of non-negative functions in a bit more clever way. So all of these techniques, what they are going to deliver is a set of n functions, b1, b2, bn for the approximation of the betas, g1, g2, gn for the approximation of the gammas. And then what we are going to do is that these functions beta and gamma that belong to our set of functions beta and gamma, so we are going to approximate them by linear combinations in the spaces generated by b1, b2, bn, and g1 to n. And this is going to be our main workhorse for the approximation, because if we do this, what we are eventually going to produce as an output is the following. Now I am searching for a beta and a gamma that is relevant for the observed health series of I and R observed. And I search for relevant beta and gamma as a linear combination of my well-chosen basis functions b1, b2, bn, g1, g2, gn. And the coefficients, how do I find them? So I find them by saying that these betas and gammas, I stick them into a shear dynamics, and the shear dynamics that results out of it, so it has to be close to my observed series in a least square sense. And this is going to give me the coefficients C and C tilde here of this expansion. And once I have them, I can define these functions beta and gamma for any time from t until my forecasting final time, t plus tau. I stick them into my seer dynamics, and I can give as a final output, so the solution I and R of my seer dynamics. And so this is how we did the forecasts. And so let me now show you several results on this. These are, for instance, some forecasts where we take the present time to be the 1st of April. We varied here the dimension of the basis where we are looking for the betas and the gammas, but you see that so there are not tremendous changes depending on this dimension variation. This is the series for infected. This is the series for recovered. Remember that we are in fact fitting betas and evolutions of betas and gammas. So this is these are evolutions of the betas, and these are evolutions of my gammas. And so I here just outputted some other dates. This is the 5th of April. You see that we can predict fairly well, in fact, the peak of the first pandemic wave. This is for the second pandemic wave in October 28th, where you see that, again, we are fairly good at predicting the peak. And so this is a freshly baked result. Actually, we've seen what this is giving for the present time. And so this is a peak for January the 5th after the second wave on the prediction of the observed. So this is it for this first part. And I actually realized I was a bit too verbose. So let's see if I can say something about the mobility, but just a roadmap now on how to incorporate mobility data. So the idea, if you could follow a bit the main lines, is the idea for an extension to a multi-regional forecast. It would be fairly simple. We just need to formulate multi-regional versions of our detailed models. For instance, formulate a multi-regional version of the Kolitsa or the Magal model. And these multi-regional versions are going to need interregional population fluxes. And we are going there to use data from Facebook that we have been given. And once we have this, then we are going to need to collapse into multi-regional seer models. And then we are again going to play the same game. We are going to build reduced models for the betas and the gammas. And we are going to do fitting and predictions as before. So I guess the main roadmap is fairly clear. But what is maybe less clear is what we can expect from this extension. And so I think that what we could expect are better long-term forecasts, and also maybe we could better understand spatial propagation, and maybe try to better explain the rise of clusters, and also we could study mobility scenarios. And I think I was only given 30 minutes, so I think I'm more or less...
You can take a few minutes to show us interesting results if you want.
Okay, so if you give me 5 minutes, I can show you some. I can show you some results from mobility data from Facebook, and why we believe it's relevant for this epidemic. So Facebook, like some other companies actually, so it's not the only one. They collect GPS data from users that accept geolocalization. And then, thanks to a process of aggregation and anonymization, so they can produce information on mobility in which we cannot identify individual behaviors. But this is still okay to understand mobility of fluxes of population. And so at Paris-Dauphine University, we have an agreement with Facebook, and they are giving us this anonymized data. And so this is the data that we have been now almost for a year trying to understand, and now we are also trying to incorporate this in our forecasting pipeline. So what I think maybe just I prepared a couple of images to maybe highlight what kind of information we can retrieve from this. So this is the evolution of the hospitalized people during the last year due to COVID. And so you see that there is a number of breakpoints in the slopes of this curve. And what is interesting is that there are the two breakpoints in the summer, the one here on the 9th of July and on the 17th of August. We cannot link them, we were not able to link them to any sanitary measures. The other ones, for instance, the one of the 15th of September can be probably connected to the generalization of having to wear a mask everywhere. And so the same for the others, we can find political events. But for the ones in the summer, we cannot connect them to anything. And so our guess is that population, mobility, and mixing could be an explanatory factor. And so here are some data that we get from Facebook to illustrate this. For instance, this is the evolution of the number of Facebook users in several French regions. So here is Île-de-France, where Paris is located. We see a dramatic decrease of users, which goes from about 7.5 million to less than 6 million during so the peak here of the decrease is exactly on the 15th of August. And so you see that compared to this, other regions which are usual holiday destinations like Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, so they register increases of population which are pretty significant. So here we rise from about 3 million to more than 3.7 million. And so the same happened in Bretagne, for example. So this we can really, thanks to this data, register this kind of movements. And it goes even beyond this, because so we can go to a relatively fine grain on geographic tiles that are at the, I mean, the minimum is 200 by 200 meters. Sometimes for anonymization problems, the tiles have to be larger, but so this is more or less the information. And so for this tile, so we can decompose the territory in this kind of tiles, and so they give you the amount of users that they registered, and this is directly proportional to the density of users that can be located on a certain tile. And we can, for instance, look at the relative density variation on these tiles and see that, for example, on the 15th of August, which is a date in which most people were on holidays. So what we register is that in many places in France, the ones in red here, we registered an increase of at least 25% of the usual density in these regions. And the blue colors are regions where we had minus 25%. So this confirms again that, in fact, well, most people from Paris and other very populated areas, they just went on holidays. And as a consequence, the overall density in most places increased relatively significantly. And so it's difficult to really prove that this is really connected to the second wave, but since these breakpoints cannot be really connected to anything else, so well, we think that this could be an explanatory factor, although we don't have any mathematical theorem, so to say, to prove this. And I think with this, I will stop because I'm out of time, but I have a couple of other pictures, and if this arises during the questions, I can comment on more.
All right. Thank you for a very nice talk. Very interesting. And in particular, it's really precious to have such beautiful data to work with. So, of course, as usual, if you have a question, you can raise the hand, and I will allow you to talk. In the meantime, so I would like to check if I understand correctly. So your model reduction technique or method. So you start from a very complex model that can reproduce the real behavior or the expected behavior of your system, and you try to find a clever way to reduce the information in a smaller basis, in a way. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I probably was not good enough in
no, that's fine. That's
producing
fine.
the motivation. No, in the sense that all these very detailed models, so they involve a lot of parameters, and
Mm-hmm.
they are very precise. They can be very precise due to the fact that they are complex, but they involve a lot of parameters, and we cannot really fit them all with the available data. So yeah, one of our motivations was to say, okay, so these models are absolutely pertinent, but somehow we just cannot work with them given the data that is provided. So let us try to distill the main information, so to speak, in a certain sense, so that we can really fit the data.
Okay, thank you. And so my real question is the following. So do you need to work with epidemic model or the same kind of model? Or can you, could you imagine that the same method will work with another kind of model to begin with? I mean, the complex model, if you use, for instance, spline approximation or something like that, could it work the same way, or do you need a differential equation model or something?
So I think that there are two things maybe here.
Maybe.
I gave the example of Kolitsa as a model, as a detailed model. We can in fact work with any other detailed model, and what is even more, we can work with several at the same time. So we as long as then we can condense them into 3 compartments. We define a rule for each detailed model on how this collapsing step here. As long as we know how to collapse every detailed model, we can consider any number of different detailed models, and we throw them all to the methodology. It means that these betas and gammas that we are going to end up with, so they are going to come from different detailed models, but at this point we have just forgotten where they come from. And
but you still you need to have a differential equation model in a way.
Yes. So yes, we somehow wanted to. Yeah, our philosophy was to say there are these models which I mean are motivated by something. Let's do something out of them. Another approach which you could very well do is to say, okay, I forget about these detailed models. I don't want to know anything about this, and in fact I prescribe these functions BI as belonging to some general multi-purpose family, like the family of wavelet functions, for example. There's been, I think, a contribution on this front, actually, by a colleague in Sorbonne University, for instance. I don't remember his name. So, yeah,
I see.
Just, yeah.
Right, thank you. Is there any other question?
Can I make a comment? In fact, this idea of minimizing the L2 norm, we use similar idea without your idea of reduction for age with the Japanese data, in fact. But and in fact, would be really interesting to apply this kind of idea to the two age group problem, for example.
For what problem? Sorry.
A problem with two age groups, the older people and the younger one, or multiple group, for example.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we would
not only the space.
Yeah, we would really have. Yeah. So,
I have another.
but how can we do this if we don't have data which is separated by age? So this is my main concern there.
For France, for Japan, and the second comment is question is, how do you choose the tau value?
In fact, tau can be taken as anything.
Yeah, so basically it gives some good result up to how long?
So okay, so that's okay. Maybe your question is connected to how accurate or how uncertain is our prediction, right?
How long can you predict before? That's my question, right?
Sorry, how can I?
How long? How many weeks or how many days can you predict before? Do you have a good prediction for the peak, for example? Because that's something very difficult to get, in fact, the peak.
I guess it's going to vary on the peak, but I think for the first wave, for example, maybe Yvonne will correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess about at least a week, we were already fine with it. And maybe even before, because so here you see the peak was reached around the 13th or 14th. And so here the data are starting on the 1st of April. So it seems that even maybe 2 weeks with
because in fact this is a difficult part to predict the peak, and that's something we got trouble with, in fact.
Okay, so also the quality of the forecast depends a little bit. It can vary on which day. So this is the 1st of April. Maybe if we consider the 2nd of April, for reasons we are actually trying to understand a bit better, maybe the forecast is going to change a bit, and then maybe we are going to miss the peak. But I guess the main message is that this method seems relatively robust to predict this kind of peaks, because on the second wave it was the same. So we were really in shape for this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Very interesting, I think.
Yeah.
And I think this is really something interesting for this problem. Okay.
But so maybe just if I may ask you a question, Pierre and Quentin, how would you incorporate meaningfully age compartments? Because so as I was saying, I think we don't have data for this. So
yes, we have. Yes,
we have reported case data
for Japan, for many countries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a data set, I think, in Santé Publique France, or maybe France Data. I think there is
and I think there are some other options also, in fact. So anyway, we can discuss that later on.
Yeah, maybe. Jeffrey, did you have a comment? I see you raised your hand.
I just have a question, but Pierre asked the same question.
About right. Okay.
Thanks.
So, okay. So, is there any last question? Maybe we can switch to Jeffrey's talk. So thank you, Olga, for a very interesting talk. We'll switch to the next session. So let me just restart recording.